to the Seahawks 360 podcast, where we look at the Seahawks from every angle every week. I'm Candace Higgins,
No, I'm Tino Ganasius.
and we are back. A little bit of a break to discuss some of the things that have happened in the offseason, mainly being that the Seahawks officially announced their offensive coordinator decision to be Klint Kubiak. So, there's a lot to get into with this, and I guess I'll just start with initial reactions. Tino, where's your head at with it?
How deep or how far you want me to go down this rabbit hole?
If we can go down the rabbit hole.
All right. So my first reaction is nepotism. That's my first reaction to the Clint Kubiak hire. What I mean by that is when you look at his resume, so I'm not happy with it. I'm not. I think there were other options that I would have liked to have seen. Um, the biggest one being Hank Fraley being paired with Jake Peetz, maybe even as a co-offensive coordinator sort of deal. But what I see is a Kubiak name, someone who was lucky enough to, be the son of a backup quarterback with the Denver Bronco at the time when uh, Gary Kubiak was a backup quarterback for the Denver Broncos behind John Elway. For those who don't know, he ends up being a coach in at Texas A&M the early 2010s, then comes to the NFL, kind of moves through, becomes a coordinator. He's been a coordinator, what is this, 3 times now? And with results that I think have been okay, and has been lucky enough to coach under in the Shanahan tree a little bit. But what I see here is I wonder if Clint Kubiak would have achieved, and I know this is a bit of a hot take, but would he have achieved what he has, which has been being a coach but not being great at it, if his last name wasn't the last name of someone who was a backup quarterback in the NFL and a coach for 2 teams, one of which who won a Super Bowl. I don't like it. I understand that he is a running game type of guy. I understand that he um is the same age as Coach McDonald. I understand that he has experience calling plays. But just because you've called plays in the NFL does not make you a good play caller, right? And so my reaction is, and I said this to you offline, I would have rather seen them take a bigger swing, right? And brought in somebody who was more I guess just more interesting, right? You look at what he did, and I understand with the Saints last year, he had, a lot of players go down, injuries to Derek Carr and Chris Olave, most importantly. And then he's fired at midseason along with Dennis Allen. I get it, right? But then he was with the Niners in 23 as the passing game coordinator. But really, that's Shanahan's offense. All you are is an understudy if you're coaching underneath Shanahan. And then with the Broncos, he was coaching with Nate Hackett. We all know who Nate Hackett is, right? And that was that first year Russell Wilson when Russell Wilson was terrible. Before that, offensive coordinator with the Vikings when he had Cousins and Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook. And that offense fell in points scored from what it had done the previous year. And he gets fired then with Mike Zimmer's staff. So for one, I don't like it. What I will say on the positive is I trust Coach McDonald and I trust John Schneider. I think that they are great minds. I want to support Clint Kubiak. I want to be wrong, right? This isn't going to be like I told you so afterwards. I want to be wrong. I want the Seahawks to be great. I want the Seahawks to win the Super Bowl. This is way down in terms of who I would have wanted. And it truly does feel like nepotism to me, as to why he is still getting chances to be a coordinator after having 3 chances already. Did you expect that
Can't
coming into
disagree. I
today's
can't.
podcast?
I can't disagree more. I love the hire. I mean, I legitimately love it. Given the options available, I think it was the best one that they could have picked. And I really don't get nepotism at all. So all your points that you brought up, I look at it in completely different ways, each one of those situations. So I look at when he was passing game coordinator under Shanahan, it was Brock Purdy's best year, right? He hasn't had a year that successful since. He
He had
leaves there, he goes,
okay, hold on, healthy McCaffrey, right? Debo more in his prime, right?
but wasn't that the year before it wasn't Healthy McCaffrey?
McCaffrey was at his best in 23.
Wasn't that when he was with
So he was a passing game coordinator in 23 with the Niners. That was McCaffrey's big year.
Wasn't that when they traded it for him? Wasn't that the year they traded for McCaffrey, like halfway through the season? Didn't he come on the back end?
22. I will double check though.
But also
Oh, keep going.
they've
I'll look it up.
had McCaffrey healthy up until last season, and I still would say that like Brock Purdy didn't look as good. Like Brock Purdy looked great that year. It was also moving on to the Vikings. It was Kirk Cousins' best year. His most efficient year was on their Klint Kubiak. And that offense was not the reason why he got fired. That defense being literally 30th with
Yes.
Mike Zimmer as the defensive head coach was why he lost that job.
Yes, that is
And
true.
of course, we do know what happened with the Saints. It's a little too small of a sample size to know for sure whether that would withstand some of the adjustments of the league, that sort of thing. But Derek Carr was looking his best. So I think he's got I think, and also I want to go back to his time with the Broncos. They went on a run after they fired Nate Hackett, and he essentially took Nate Hackett's playbook. Because at that point, when you're talking about a midseason, you know, firing, you're not remaking any playbook. You're taking the same play calls and you're sequencing them differently. You are
You could
then
tweak.
using the
So
material.
McCaffrey did go in 22 to the Niners. So 23 was his first full year with the Niners,
Okay,
right? And so I guess what I might
have
argue,
to utilize that, right? Like Brock Purdy has had seasons with Christian McCaffrey and not looked as good.
and Candace,
Up and
that's
down.
Shanahan's offense though. Shanahan's fingerprints are all over that offense. My hope, I
Then
don't
how
give
come Brock Purdy hasn't matched it since?
I don't give him any credit. My hope is that he learns something from Shanahan and can apply it later. I don't give him credit for actually doing that. As far as being with the Broncos, they were better than what they were when Hackett was calling plays, but that don't mean that much, right? And
It
especially with
does. It does. It means that we took, all right, we know Nate Hackett it's frankly a terrible offensive coordinator, right? Like most of his playbook is trash, right? If you're taking trash playbooks and trash concepts and you're making it and turning it into winning football on the fly,
or he could have pared
Maybe that's
down.
one thing. And he didn't do so with a lot of tools. You know what I mean? It's not like they just had a ton of weapons. You're taking the same thing, you're calling it differently, and then you're turning it into success. I mean, there's going to be a ceiling on that.
So
Obviously,
is okay.
heck,
So taking Russell Wilson and the Broncos offense from being absolutely horrendous and people wondering what's wrong with Russell Wilson to being slightly below average is not why you hire someone to
why
be
not?
the new offensive coordinator, right? What
Why
he
not?
did in Minnesota, they went from 11th to 14th in points and they went from 4th to 12th in yards under under Kubiak. And he had weapons like JJ and a prime Dalvin Cook.
Didn't
That's
JJ
why
have like a
Cousins had his best year because Dalvin Cook was in his prime. They had a new wide receiver that was a top five wide receiver in a line that could block, right?
We'll disagree on Dalvin Cook being
Not to
him.
mention the fact that the defense giving up that many yards means that you have an offense that has an opportunity to chuck the ball around, right? And so, and it's easier to run an offense when you're just throwing the ball all the time. You're going to put up points because they're not going to play an aggressive defense in at that time. I don't know. I don't see when I look at this resume, this does not in any way excite me. The only thing that I like about this is that he coached under Shanahan and that he has shown a propensity to run the ball and to be under center and run play action. This sounds like he walked into an interview with Coach McDonald and John Schneider and said, I like to run the ball. I know what Shanahan does. I want to get under center. I want to run outside zone and want to run play action. And they said, you're hired because you want to do what we want to do. And you answered those five questions correctly. And your last name is Kubiak. That's what it sounds like to me.
Why aren't we looking at, so here's the reality, okay? If he had had explosive results, you're not getting him.
Agreed.
There's no offensive coordinator. Let's just be realistic. There's no offensive coordinator you're going to get who had amazing results in an elite offense that's
Because
going to go get another offensive coordinator job,
I get
right?
it. I get it. I
So
agree.
with that in mind, because you're saying you're underwhelmed with his resume,
Uh-huh.
you're not going to get better.
You, I don't want a better resume. What I want is I want something new. The reason I bring up nepotism, and the reason why I bring up the way that like what Shanahan's resume says is these guys get recycled over and over again, and they get 4 and 5 chances to become, an offensive coordinator when they failed in in those previous three. And you've got this huge bucket of coaches who I think deserve an opportunity to try. I would rather take another risk on someone who hasn't, who you think has talent than someone who has failed 3 times.
Did you
That's
know
what I'm
that
saying.
Carl Shanahan had failed 2, 3 times before he
Absolutely.
got
But
with the
that doesn't
Seahawks?
mean that he's going
He
to be
had he
Carl
had
Shanahan.
similar results. I just want to put it out there. He had similar. If you looked at his resume before before being elevated and
I
going to
remember.
really with the Falcons, his
I remember.
resume looked the same.
Right.
So I don't really understand what you mean by when you say you want something
You
new.
can learn.
You've
Yes,
done something
you
new
learn from your
twice.
experiences. I get it. What I wanted was I wanted them to bring in someone who was like Hank Fraley, who's gonna come in and rebuild this offensive line. Without a rebuilt offensive line and great offensive line coaching, this offense isn't going anywhere,
I
right?
don't think
I think you already had a brilliant mind in Jake Peetz sitting here in this organization. You bring in someone who's going to rebuild the offensive line and pair him with a mind like Jake Peetz and let them work together. I think there's a reason why Hank Fraley was the first name that Seattle asked to interview, right? I think
no,
the
he wasn't.
Seahawks, he was very much was the first name that Seattle requested to interview. They requested permission to interview him. He may not have been the first interview. He was the first name they asked for.
Okay, well, yeah, because they didn't have to ask for it. Wasn't Kubiak already a free agent at that point?
Okay, that's
Like, he had
semantic.
already been
So,
given permission to like.
uh, we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Again, in my opinion, right? It's the same reason why Schottenheimer got the job in with the Cowboys. How many times has Schottenheimer taken over an offense and people have been like, how the heck does he have a job?
You're comparing 11 years to like 3.
Okay, but their last names are like synonymous with football, is what I'm saying. The reason why they keep getting these chances, in my opinion, or chances to prove themselves to maybe once be good at what they do, is they're getting hired because of bloodlines, right? They're getting hired because they've had doors open for them that others don't have.
I
And
really disagree.
I would have rather elevated Jake Peetz to be your offensive coordinator than hired Klint Kubiak. I don't see anything on his resume that tells me that he's going to be good. Show
Where,
me that it says he's going to be good. Show
where
me.
does it say that Jake Peetz is going to be good? Where does
I'd
it say
rather take the
Steve
chance
Frank
on
is
someone
going to
who
be
I
good?
believe has talent, right?
Why would you take the chance when you need stability?
I don't think
This
stability is what they
team,
need. The
if you're
offensive line is what they need.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you. But offensive line, getting Hank Frankly doesn't automatically equal elite offensive line. It just doesn't.
I
Because
think
frankly, he may not even be ready to call plays. I think there's a legitimate question about
Jake Peetz
if
might be.
when you hear someone's name being mentioned and they immediately say, but he's going to need a pass game coordinator, it means there's an obvious deficit there.
For sure. Absolutely. I think the
With that
deficit
in mind,
is that
why
he
is that
hasn't
the
been
swing to take?
successful yet, right? Not being successful yet, being given 3 chances is much more of a deficit than somebody knowing that somebody has to learn how to call plays, right? I also think that Fraley could be your offensive coordinator and Pete's could have called plays or they could have been co-offensive coordinators. I'm asking them to try something different. I'm asking them to think outside of the box, right? Just because Ryan Grubb was an unorthodox hire does not mean that all unorthodox hires don't work. It means that that particular one didn't work. What I do know that doesn't work is recycling the same dang names over and over again and hoping that they're going to be different.
Okay, even if we're going on your nepotism hire, the
Mhm.
Seahawks' best offense under Russell Wilson was undershotty, despite his flaws. I'm not saying he didn't have
I'm
flaws.
not saying
He
Schottenheimer was
did.
horrible.
But I'm
What I'm
saying there's
saying
a
is he's
clear,
getting opportunities down the road because he's Marty's son.
maybe Schottenheimer is, well, and really, frankly, Schottenheimer didn't have a job until Mike McCarthy brought him from the ethers of the earth. So, I mean, I think
Which
even that was done, right? But I don't think 3 years is enough to say, oh, he's no good, especially when he still had average to slightly below average results. It's not like he was just flat bad, even in the worst of circumstances. And frankly,
then
he
why didn't
had
any
the
of these
best of
teams want to
circumstances.
keep him?
Wow, what? What now?
Why didn't any of these teams want to keep him?
because the defensive coordinator, he was under a defensive coach that got fired every time. He didn't get fired because
Right.
he
Zimmer,
wanted
so Zimmer gets
right.
fired.
Zimmer got
Hackett gets
fired.
fired.
Dennis Allen gets fired. He's not actually been fired of his own accord
No,
because
understood. Or maybe he has, and they're couching it under the, the underneath the head coach being fired.
no,
I
I
just
mean, how often does a head coach not bring his own guys? I mean, seriously, not pick his own guys. Seriously, like that doesn't really
this is the
happen.
most
If the
Candace,
coach is
this is the
going,
most milk toast hire I have ever seen. It's like it's the dude that coached in the under the tree of the team that you're competing with in your division, and his dad was an NFL quarterback, and he looks the part. He's the, not to go here, but he's the skinny white dude that wears the cap a certain way, and he's coached at a bunch of different, like, give me something different, right? I think seeing here, so hold on, let me give you an example. Seeing Dan Campbell and seeing what Dan Campbell accomplished in Detroit by taking a really different perspective, right? And coming in and bringing a certain energy, right? And saying we're going to be different and zigging when everybody is zagging and is interesting to me. I think that's some of the direction that the NFL needs to go, right? If you want to win and you want to compete, you have to be ahead of the curve. You have to start doing things differently than what everybody else is doing. That's why I love the idea of Fraley so much. Was I think this team is in some ways boring. I think this team needs some different stuff on the offensive side of the ball. It's stale, it's stagnant. And you brought in a dude who's been an offensive coordinator 3 different times already. Bring in somebody who has some really new and interesting and wild ideas, right?
why?
Bring in somebody with some energy.
Why? How does that help the team win better right now?
I think you
How does
have to mix.
excitement help the team win better right
It's
now?
not excitement, it's attitude, right? The offense to me has no attitude. It has no identity.
Okay, I think that's an excellent point. I completely agree with you. You want to know why it hasn't had identity in so long? Because we've had so many first-time play callers who don't yet know their identity.
I don't
They
think that's
don't yet have the
because
go-to plays. They don't
just
yet know how to
because
sequence plays. And it's
just
not
because you are a first-time coordinator does not mean you don't have an identity. It does not mean you can come in. You think Hank Fraley's not going to have an identity coming in as an offensive coordinator?
he doesn't yet know how to marry the run and the pass. So
How do
no,
we know that? How do we know
he
that?
literally no, we do know that.
How
We
do
know
we know
that
that?
as soon as his name was mentioned, he was going to depend heavily on a pass game
Okay.
coordinator.
So if he depending on someone does not mean that you're not able to do it. It means that you're going to have help. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you have to have help.
That means it's not a
Different.
strong point. How can you marry the run and the pass game when you have to then figure out how these two different people are then going to function and operate this
What if
together? And we're going
what
to
if the
do
two
it.
people are better than one? What if the two different heads are better than one, right?
How long? But how long is that going to take to manifest? We don't have, if we were in rebuild mode,
It's going to be shorter than Kubiak because I don't think Kubiak's going to ever do it at all.
I, I,
Right?
I gotta be honest with you. I think that is great if we're talking about rebuilding, we're talking about tearing the whole thing down. Then I agree with you because you got all the time in the world to grow with this new mind, to grow with this new attitude. You don't have that now. That's not the way your roster is built right now. And so you go with what's best for the roster that you have right now, which is a lot of pieces that can help you make a run.
I would argue that if you can make the offensive line above average immediately, everything else falls into place. That would be my argument, is that by making the offensive line better, you give Gino more time. He doesn't make the same mistakes. You create more time to get the ball deep to DK. You have a more balanced offense because now K9 has room to run the ball. And all of a sudden, this whole thing opens up, right? The offensive line to me is the key to this entire offense and ultimately the success of the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. I think you bring in an offensive line guru and build that, and you have Jake Pete's help and contribute to the play calling, right? And you may have more minds in the room by having those two. But I think those two are better than what Kubiak brings. Again, I will repeat, I hope I'm wrong. I 100% hope I'm wrong as a Seahawks fan.
I think you got to be wrong. Just 'cause I
Just,
think there's a clear floor that exists, a clear floor.
I don't want the floor. I want the ceiling.
That's the problem.
I want the ceiling.
That's the problem. We
What's
don't
the
need that
floor?
big of a ceiling.
Are you
We
happy
watched
making
this.
the playoffs and losing in the first round?
No, we watched this offense be top 10 with Shane Waldron. It's talented, and that's with the bad offensive line. We still had a bad offensive line, for the
Mhm.
record. We don't need the sun, the moon, and the stars to take the next step. And
I'm
that's
not
my
saying that.
disagreement.
I said above average. I'm not saying elite. I'm saying above
I
average.
think he's clearly above average, and I think he's shown that given a crap ton of situations. In fact,
I mean,
give
look
me
up in the 3 years in the three different offensive coordinator jobs.
why is 3 years so much time to you? It's really not.
But it's three
You're
different
making
jobs. If
it
he
sound
was a
like
brilliant mind, he would have stayed. If he was a brilliant mind, people would have wanted him.
no, why? He's associated with the old regime.
If I'm the Saints, I would have wanted to hire him as my offensive coordinator if I or as either as a coordinator or even a head coach at 37 if he was that brilliant, right? Shanahan would have done everything in his power to keep him if he was that brilliant. The Broncos would have kept him because he made Russell Wilson so much better than Nate Hackett did,
Well, the
right?
Broncos clearly want to
The
show.
Vikings may not have brought in KOC. They might have wanted to keep, to keep him there, keep Kubiak there
And
if he was that brilliant. I don't see, I don't
it's not about being brilliant. Why does it have to be the 101% to get this Seahawks team over the hump? Because even if you, okay, hypothetically, right? Even if you found the 01%, the shiny new toy, you
It's
would
not
not
shiny
have
new
done
toy. It's
wrong.
give me the dude that can coach the offensive line. There's a big difference between those two.
Yeah, but there's nothing, and in fact, I would argue there's more evidence to point that Kubiak can coach offensive line than Frank Haley, than Hank Fraley. Because when you look at it, look what he did. They had like 9 different starters on the offensive line last year. Like he's clearly taken the bottom of the barrel, your fourth string, your fifth
What he
string.
did in New Orleans was he just found every way to get the ball to Alvin Kamara quickly. That's how he ran his offense. Which is good. I think it was the smart thing to do because they couldn't block. And they've wasted some first round picks on offensive tackles and offensive line that haven't turned out. I'm not saying he did a horrible job with the Saints. I'm asking why doesn't anybody want to keep him? That's what I'm asking.
Well, he's
Why
associated
didn't
with
anybody want him?
because how many name me the guys who stayed when the head coach went. Name
He
me the long list of men.
It can't happen. I don't study it enough to know. What I
If
know is if you have talent, you keep them.
if
That's
it
what
happened more often, if it happened more often, those names would be taught.
okay.
You,
To me, this is like I said, this is boring. This is milk toast. This is a recycled dude who's been kicked to the curb 3 different times as an OC, who doesn't have a resume other than his last name and coaching for the Niners. That makes me excited. It doesn't make me excited at all.
I
It
don't
just
care if
doesn't.
he wasn't a Kubiak at all. I'm interested in what he's done. I'm very interested with how he's been able to operate his past 3 opportunities. I just think just because the results aren't shiny doesn't mean that the process wasn't sound. I'm looking at the process.
Sure,
The
I'm a
process
big
was
process
sound.
person. I'm 100% there with you. I'm there with you.
But that's what matters when you're looking at these type of things. You're never going to be able to get someone with elite results.
What I'm saying is I don't believe that you need NFL experience as a play caller to be a great play caller in the NFL. I think because Ryan Grubb didn't work, we are assuming that a an unexperienced play caller isn't going to do well. I think,
I'm not assuming that. I'm
okay,
not saying that you're guaranteed to fail if you don't have experience. I'm saying they can't afford the risk.
I don't mind the risk. And
They
that's where we
can't
differ.
afford it. This
I'd rather
roster,
take the risk than a 3-time failed OC. That's just me.
this
I'd
this
rather take
this
the risk.
roster can't afford it. See, here's what I think. You're right. It is boring, right? And the only reason why
Hella
I'm
boring. Not
saying
just boring. This is hella boring.
no, it's not. I disagree there. I really love some of the things I saw in his offense. Frankly, I think he had a great combination when watching some of the clips and things I've seen from the Saints offense of still being able to have an efficient run game, but also taking deep shots, which is something that frankly he does more than Kyle Shanahan even does. So I
Yes.
think you're still getting some upside, a guy who's still got a little bit more diversified of a drop back game within the benefits of the Shanahan offense, and then you're building all that. That's not to say that the system won't have flaws. I mean, every system does, even Kyle Shanahan's does. So
I think also if you take what, so let me rewind and say, if you take what Kubiak does and you try to fit it into this current Seahawks team, to your point, right? You're taking a guy who likes to be under center, is he called the fifth most plays under center in the NFL last year, right? An above average designed run rate, right? So this is a guy who is doing the things that Coach McDonald wants. He also loves to take deep shots. One of the things Coach McDonald said in his criticisms of Coach Grubb was that he didn't go deep enough, right? So a guy who wants to run the ball, I think that outside zone scheme is what is 100% what Walker and Charbonnet should be running. I think that's the right scheme for those two. I also know that your two offensive tackles are your strength, right, on this current offensive line. So that outside zone scheme is good. I think on paper, when you plug in what Kubiak does or what he's shown to have done so far, I think it makes sense as to what Coach McDonald and John Schneider want. What I'm saying is, I just that's I want to see something. There's nothing dynamic about him. There's nothing interesting about him to me. There's nothing, and the reason why, again, why I use nepotism is I feel like looking at him, I could say those things walking into an interview. I know what Coach McDonald wants. Here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, right? But I'll never have an opportunity to walk through those doors, no matter how my brain works. I think it doesn't mean he's not going to be very good. Look, Shanahan's great. You could make the same case about Shanahan as you did him getting fired from different places. It leaves me wanting so much more. I think it's just a flat hire. It's boring to me. Now, if he can come in and create some structure and create some identity and it ends up working, then that's great. And I'm happy to say that I'm wrong. Again, I hope that I'm wrong. I wanted to see something more interesting. I wanted to see something more dynamic. I wanted to see them really focus on this offensive line because I think that's the key to the whole thing.
I don't think that getting Kubiak means they're negating the offensive line. I'm not
No,
sure,
I agree. I agree, but you could have brought in the best offensive line coach in the NFL to be your offensive coordinator.
but that doesn't equal a strong offense.
No, but it does couple with a brilliant mind in Jake Peets.
The
I think.
Do we know how brilliant Jake Peets is?
I think he is. I think everything that you read
Honestly,
about him, everything that you read about him is that he's an up and coming superstar. Everything that you read about him is that his passing game kind of process, if you want to use your term, is really, really, really good, right? And that he's really a great quarterback coach.
how many times does that hit? How many times have we heard that about other guys?
All the time.
Almost every
All the
offseason.
time. And you know what? Those other guys don't get four chances to be an offensive coordinator either.
Most of those guys don't work.
Kind of like Kubiak.
Kubiak, we have no proof that he hasn't actually worked. In fact, we have proof to the contrary.
He's been fired 3 times.
Any of his guys were fired. It wasn't the offense. It wasn't the offense.
You hold on to talent. There are guys who get held over all the time. You hear of these offensive line coaches who have been with the organization for 25 years and who have like withstood a whole bunch of fires. It happens. It
That's,
happens.
that's a lower level coach,
He was a
not an
passing game
offensive
coordinator in San
coordinator.
Francisco.
Offensive
He didn't
coordinators
get
don't.
fired, but I don't know. We're gonna disagree a lot with this. I just don't. I'm not feeling it. I think he walked in and he said the right things, and he's been a coordinator 3 times, and they said that play calling was an issue with Grubb. So you checked all the boxes. I don't want to check all the boxes, dude. You want that high floor because you believe that the rest of the talent on this team can take the team really deep in the playoffs. I understand that thought process, right? I totally understand. High floor coordinator, don't make the same mistakes, raise the level of this offense a little bit. This defense is going to continue to get better. You have a lot of talent at the skill positions on offense. You can make a deeper run. I want a Super Bowl. I don't think that's a Super Bowl recipe, right? I want a Super Bowl. I think a Super Bowl, you have to take some swings.
I
Hank
disagree.
Fraley was a swing.
I disagree. I disagree completely. In fact, I think I would argue that some of your most successful coaches who have won it all had a resume of failure. Andy Reid,
When did anybody fail?
Bruce Arians. I
You
mean,
are yes, you are going to fail. You are going to fail 3 times in 5 years.
well, I think all of those guys were considered guys who can't get it done, guys who just aren't good enough. They're below average. They'll get you a certain floor, right? There's a floor there with them, those guys, right? But they can't win it all.
Reed was
Yeah,
great. Reed was great in Green Bay. Reed was great with Walsh. He came from the right tree, but he also had a more prominent role under those guys, right?
You said
And
Reed.
Andy Reid.
Reed. Okay.
I just
Wasn't he?
again we can agree to disagree with this.
We
I
will
just
for
don't.
sure.
I'm not
I
feeling
don't
it.
think because I don't think we can see it on more opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, I will agree with you that it is a safe hire. I will use safe, right? Is the word
I don't
and
even know if it's safe.
maybe to some that equals boring. But I actually think that that's the recipe you need to get you to the Super Bowl. Because to your point, they're going to have to fix this offensive line,
Mhm.
right? I think
Regardless.
it's completely unrealistic for them to have done that overnight in one season.
I don't. I think you can spend a one and a two on offensive linemen, and you can go out and sign two more guys, and now you've got a talented offensive line that needs to be coached up.
How many, if you go back and you look through the last 5 to 6 years, you won't find many interior rookie offensive linemen that made an immediate impact day one.
Go look at the Lions that were coached by none other than Hank Fraley. Let's go look at his offensive line real quick and see how many of these guys were drafted.
And go look at what their grades were their first year.
That offensive line was
Yeah.
very
And
good.
also, and
And that's
let's look at
amazing.
picks that weren't like top 10, all right? Because that's not the Seahawks won't have that, right? Their top
No.
10 pick is Charles Cross. That's their guy.
So Decker was a one. Zeitler was a free agent. Ragnow, I believe, was a two.
But
Sewell
how
was
long
a
did
top
it
10
take?
pick. You're not
Day
getting
one.
Penei Sewell.
Day one. It's what I want to year one.
Penei Sewell was not what he is right now, but he was very good his first year. Frank Ragnow was very good his first year. Graham Glasnow out of Michigan was very good his first year as well.
What Panay Sewells do you see in this draft?
I'm not there aren't. So Kelvin Banks is not my favorite, but he is very good. There are no Penei Sewells, but hey, they're gonna be better than Jake Curhan and your boy Stone Forsythe, though.
Well,
Those
yes,
guys
but that's
got
all
time.
of the barrel. But what my point is, it's going to take some time. One, because continuity is one of the biggest things that impacts offensive line. You're not getting continuity this year. You're not, because we got to overhaul and make some changes.
Well, you can create continuity if you bring in talent and you give them the opportunity to fail for a little while and work together. You can create continuity. I believe you can.
Not gonna
I also think this team has three of its five. I like Laumea, right? I think we agree. We both like Laumea.
happen.
If you say Laumea is your right guard and Lucas is your right tackle and Cross is your left tackle, and you have some kind of contingency plan for Lucas when he misses 10 games, then you're looking for a center and a guard and a left guard, right?
So
And say
that's the
one of them was a high pick and one of them was a high profile free agent. I think you have the makings of a an average to slightly above average offensive line.
thing you have the makings of on paper without if you especially if you're talking about a guy without experience of probably still a below average offensive line. Probably.
With better coaching. So I don't Scott Huff, I didn't believe in Scott Huff as a coach at the University of Washington, let alone being hired by the Seahawks. I was very I questioned that hire quite a bit. He was hired because that offensive line was great for 1 year. And I think a lot of that was Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer. But so you bring in a coach who I think is better than Scott Huff, and you invest you push all your chips in at offensive line. Maybe you're bringing in four guys. Maybe it's a one, a three, and a four, plus a high profile free agent. And you just say, you know what, we need talent in this room. To me, that's how you fix it. And I don't think you have to. We talked about this. I don't think you have to invest in a bunch of other places. But what I'm saying is if I'm going to invest those resources, which I believe they're going to do, I want the guy who's going to coach them up the best. I want the guy who's going to get the best out of them. Now, if you believe Kubiak is going to get a lot more out of Gino and a lot more out of DK and a lot more out of K9 than a combination of Pete's and Fraley, then okay. I just don't believe that's the case. I really don't believe that's the case.
Still, I still stand by that Kubiak is the best thing for this offensive line. Give me the guy who's shown he can work with the bottom barrel in terms of offensive line and still make it functional, and then give him better talent.
I
Give
don't
the
want
guy who's proven he can succeed even in the worst of circumstances,
to
which
see
means
this. So that was Tom Cable, right? That was what Tom Cable was. That's what everyone said Tom Cable was for years, who was the offensive line coach under Pete Carroll. They always said Tom Cable can make them out, can make somebody great out of you know what. And so they wouldn't invest resources in the offensive line because they had Tom Cable. He was this like secret sauce. He ended up not being that, but no, that's not what I don't. I believe that you need a great coach and you need to invest in the offensive line to make this offensive line what it needs to be. I think you need both.
and that's what I think they're getting in Kubiak. At least a good one. I don't think they're getting a bad one. I don't think anybody's saying, "Oh no, this has a potential to be a disaster." And I think
No.
there'll be plenty of strong argument that that has the potential to be disaster when you're doing a first time play caller. Now, you're right. It doesn't guarantee disaster. It can be upside. But again, with this roster in the place that you're in, you cannot ever afford to take that risk. Not in this circumstance. Because here's the thing. If they miss on that offensive coordinator, Mike might be gone because John might be gone. And you're starting all over anyway. That's the stakes.
Can you win a Super Bowl with Klint Kubiak as your offensive coordinator with this team as
I
it's constructed,
100%
assuming
believe you
that the
can.
offensive line gets better?
I 100% believe you can.
Okay.
I 100% believe you can. I don't know why you wouldn't, especially if, again, you fix the offensive line, right? You make some changes on that angle. You give Gino a clear floor. Gino is one of the best. He was literally the best play action quarterback the year before last. And you're now giving him an offense where play action is going to be a big chunk of the offense.
He wasn't the only guy who was gonna of the candidates that would be willing to run play action,
But
right?
yeah, it's not running it. I'm saying his entire system is based around the strengths of your quarterback.
Right. So, but so is Detroit's, right? Detroit is Jared Goff functions 1,000 times better in play action than he does in any other under any other kind of setup.
But that's
We
not, you
knew
can't
that when he
compare.
was with the Rams, and we know that with the Lions, right?
You
I don't
can't.
think it's hard to go in there and run a bunch of play action. It's a philosophical thing. So
I
you
think,
narrow your search to guys who are coming from play action type systems who want to run play action.
I think
That doesn't mean Kubiak's your guy. It just means he happens to be one of that pool.
I'm not sure why it's assumed that because he comes from the Lions offense, that would be his offense.
That's what he knows.
He
What he
knows all.
knows is what he knows is running the ball. What he knows is running the ball. And as you know, that's what I wanted to see. That's my own personal like philosophy as far as winning football games is being a really powerful running team.
You didn't lose that. You didn't
No,
lose that in NBA.
you didn't lose it. Yes, I think that the difference between Kubiak's approach and what Fraley would have done is completely different. I also think that you're bringing in the best offensive line coach in football, which would have made a huge difference. We're going in circles. I understand that we disagree with this. I think that this is what we might as well call this the mismatch. I know you're in Memphis and home of Chris Vernon because we do end up having these conversations. I think this is what makes it great, right? That we come at it from really different perspectives. But I just I don't know. It leaves me really, really, really wanting something really different. And it I'm not against boring, right? I'm the guy who likes to run the ball all the time. I just think it's not imaginative. It's not interesting. It's not
It's
I don't
not
know.
because it's not shiny. It's not shiny in its
No,
youth.
I don't care about the shiny either. I don't think Hank Fraley is shiny. I think if he would have gotten hired, people would have been like, "What are you doing?
I
You're
think
hiring an
anybody,
offensive line coach."
I think anybody who's not calls plays is shiny because there's a mystery to it. Because it could be the sky, it could be the moon. Anybody in a box that's been unused.
See, to me, so part of what I wanted to see was I admire the way that the Detroit organization has been built, right? It's been built with passion, it's been built with energy, it's been built with relationship building in a really different way than I think we've seen in other places. And what Hank Fraley was coming into that interview with was that he has an incredible relationship with players, that he was able to galvanize this offensive line, that he was in some ways like a junior Dan Campbell, right? He had that kind of energy. And that to me is what that infusion of energy and intensity, I think is what, it's what offensive lines need. It's what this team needs. I want to see this team be, we saw what it did for the defense. We saw what Coach McDonald and his energy, right? With like pre and post Witherspoon, that energy is necessary in the NFL to win. That's what I see from Fraley. That's what was interesting to me. It's not just that he hasn't called plays. It's that philosophically he wants to run the ball and he wants to kick everyone else's butt. That Detroit Lions style football. And I think that is where the NFL is headed in many ways. It was very interesting to me. But it's not because he hasn't called plays and it's not because he's shiny. I don't think he's shiny. In fact, I think people would have been more upset with him than they are with Kubiak. I don't know that people are upset with Kubiak. I think they would have been upset with Fraley as the hire because he doesn't have play calling history in the same way that Ryan Grubb came in without NFL play calling history. That would have been the criticism.
And Shane Waldron. And Shane Waldron. But let me ask you this. And then we can wrap up here. I will ask you this. You brought up earlier how Klint Kubiak, if he was that brilliant, he should have been promoted. People should have kept him. Why isn't Hank Fraley the offensive coordinator for the Lions? Because they have an opening. And they know him better than anyone else. Why not promote him to the offensive coordinator role if he was the guy, if he was brilliant, if he was ready?
Did they? Did
No,
they hire somebody?
they haven't, but they've already named him as the run game coordinator.
Okay. And maybe he's happy doing that. Maybe he's happy in that organization doing it. And if he was to leave the organization, maybe he would want to do something different. Maybe he's not completely ready to take on the entire offensive coordinator role. And he knows that, and the Lions know that. Yes, which is why would I say he was the perfect person without Jake Peets? I wouldn't. My whole point from like 15 seconds into this podcast was you pair the two together, that he needs somebody to work with, that two minds may be better than one. That was my point. It's not solely Hank Fraley. It's Hank Fraley plus Jake Peets is what I wanted to see.
But why? What evidence do we have that Jake Peets is that just just because a guy's
Well, you just said we don't have evidence of a lot of these guys being good until they're good, right?
well, we have more evidence than Kubiak than any of the guys you've named. Then Jake Peets,
I
then
think Kubiak has evidence of straight failure. I'd
no,
rather take a chance.
no, not failure at all. I think failure is a far over exaggeration if you go look at the
The
offensive results.
Vikings fell in points. They fell 8 places in yards. He was there as the passing game coordinator and quarterback coach with Russell Wilson when Russell Wilson looked worse than any point in his entire career.
He actually looked
And then he's
better
the
under.
coordinator with the Saints, is 24th in points, 23rd in points per drive, and 22nd in EPA per play. I get injuries, but all teams have injuries. Those numbers are in the 20s that I just named, and the ones that were not in the 20s fell. Those are bad results to me. They just are.
They're not with the circumstances he had. Especially, I respect the work he did with the Broncos organization. I think above all, I really do.
Yeah, the
I
Broncos.
respect what he did in that last stint of that
So their
chaotic.
Those Nate Hackett times were a tire fire. 100%. 100% tire fire. The Vikings under Zimmer, I think could have been better. I also would grant him, okay, that's his first OC job, right? And he took over a team with a lot of talent. And he didn't burn it down, but he didn't do well. He didn't make them better. I think the job that he did with the Saints was, I don't know,
But I
almost admirable because he had such a bad collection of talent. I'm just asking, why does a guy like that keep getting opportunities when
because
there are other people who might be more talented not getting opportunities? Is Kubiak instead of some of the other guys that they had talked about?
because one, they're like I said, that floor matters, and two, I think he has done more with less.
He's
I
done
mean, I
tiny,
look at
he's
it
done a
completely.
tiny bit with not very much.
I mean, when you have 30th level defenses, we already know how that goes on your
For
offense,
sure.
right?
Well,
So like I'm willing to cut the guy some credit in that they had when the
um,
defense can't get stops and you're playing hero ball to
I
still
didn't
get
want to.
efficient moves from your quarterback.
I didn't want a coordinator that we have to try to, put lipstick on a pig to make it acceptable, and that's how it feels.
I think you putting lipstick on a pig for any of those other guys.
But that was the pool from which we had to hire, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Would you love uh, you know,
Ben Johnson or whatever.
uh,
Ben Johnson.
yeah, I mean, yeah, would you love that? Of course. But again, I feel like in the years, in more recent years in football, those guys don't get, I mean, you don't get those guys, right?
No, but you want to get the next one, right?
But if you get the next one, he's gone.
Okay. So you get Hank Fraley, and he's the next one. He's gone in 2 years. But in those 2 years, we become a top offense and we go and win a Super Bowl.
I actually think under Kubiak, because of his name, I think he's gonna have to prove more that is legit. And that, like, let's say he succeeds year one. I think gonna have to do it again because people are gonna be reluctant to hire the guy and then it just be, oh, well, it was just a fluke, right? And that people don't want it to seem like it's nepotism. I think you actually get way more continuity with a successful season out of Kubiak than you do any of those other choices. Even in the best case scenario, to your point, I still think the long term, you still get better results with Kubiak.
We'll see.
We will, for sure. We'll see for sure. No,
And
this is
just
interesting. It surprised me that you were that against it. I know you were a Hank guy, but
it's just
I didn't
it's
know you were that far on the opposite spectrum either. So,
I don't know. We've seen, I guess, just to recap or a summary for me, you see retread, I see retread coordinators in the NFL, for the last 30 years. It's guys, and you're saying like, why did that guy get another opportunity? And why did that guy get another opportunity? And sometimes it's the people who you know, sometimes it's your last name, sometimes it can be all sorts of things. The flip side is why doesn't Eric Bieniemy, why didn't he get a head coaching gig, right? And I know, and I understand that Bieniemy wasn't great in interviews and whatnot, but I just
right.
I just feel like I'm not a huge fan, but he was the coordinator for the best offense in the NFL for years, right?
Did you just get
So
fired from UCLA?
yeah, but he's a running backs coach. I think he just got hired as a running backs coach
Getting
with
demoted.
I'm not
That's
remembering
not a good example.
in the NFL.
I mean,
Anyways, my
don't use
point
that. Don't use him.
my point is I don't. It really hits me kind of wrong. The Kubiak hire. I wanted to see something different. I wanted to see them, take a shot at a different philosophy and a different perspective. I know that Coach McDonald wanted alignment, but I also think in an interview it's easy to tell somebody what they want if you know what they want. And I just his resume falls flat for me. I think he's been given one too many opportunities to be an offensive coordinator. And I don't care that he coached under Shanahan for 1 year, right? And I don't care that what their results were because Shanahan's offense is exactly that. It's Shanahan's offense, not anybody else's. So my point is I want to see the offensive line be great. I think that's how this team wins a Super Bowl. Hank Fraley was my guy. I'm super disappointed it's not him. And we'll see what Kubiak has. I hope I'm wrong. I truly, genuinely hope I'm wrong.
Well, I think ultimately you will be. I think this is the best decision that they could have made of all of the options available. I feel really strongly about that. And it might not be like stars and I don't know, like it may not be the best offense in the league. Um, I think this defense is special. I think they're building something special on that defensive end. And I think they're gonna be explosive on offense. So I also don't think that this is a thing where all you need to do is, hold on to the ball. So I think it's gonna strike a really great balance of explosion and also, like Mike McDonald said, complementary football. I am excited about the direction and all of the new things that are happening under Mike McDonald. And frankly, that's interesting enough for me. I think you get too interesting and you start undercutting your own efforts when you get too spicy. I think Mike McDonald having a full year to make this team what he wants it to be able to focus solely on personnel and not necessarily, I mean, they've already made the hire, so Mike McDonald's at Senior Bowl, things like that. That's what I want to see. I think that's extremely interesting. I think that he's got enough pull on John Snyder to finally maybe be able to pry John Snyder and doing some things differently than he has before. He's already shown that that's the case. John Snyder's done some things that he hasn't done before under the when he was with Pete Carroll versus under Mike McDonald. So I think we'll still get plenty interesting. Um, we may not get style points, but I think we'll be plenty interesting. I think this team, if they make the right moves, and it is contingent upon, I think at this point it's on John, right? Can we make the right moves to put this team over the hump? 10-7 is a great place to start. Great place to start. And I think from there, you need just some structure on that offensive side. And I think you need an offensive line. You need to improve it. We'll see if John's willing to spend the money I think that it's going to take to
Resources, money and
yeah.
resources, right? I
I'm
agree.
real big on money. I want maybe I'm with you. One guy drafted, one free agent. I think experience matters. I don't think you can just pull two rookies and then expect magic. I don't think that's gonna happen. If they really want day one results, I think they need to get someone who's worth spending money on. Someone that other teams want to.
Mhm.
That's what I like to see. Some other teams to show value in this said player, and you have to pay a cost. That's what it takes, in my opinion, to get over the hump. Yeah.
Michael and Waynu last year, who they could have
Mi-
had.
Michael, who?
And Waynu, the guard tackle for the Patriots, who I keep hammering on that they could have signed.
Yeah, we'll forever disagree about that one. I think I think guys tend to stay with their home if they can. I
Right.
think the human side of it, they do. But I do think I will agree with you. I still feel like there were some other choices, particularly on the interior, that they could have made. Um, and they can rectify that ship this year.
Hey,
I'd love to see a Trey Smith.
Trey Smith, I was just about to say Trey Smith. Go back up and give him every bag. Back up the truck and give Trey Smith everything you can. That will change the complexion. Eat here. This is what I'm gonna say. Even Klint Kubiak could lead this team to a top five offense with Trey Smith at guard. That'll be my statement of the day. So mad at me right now.
I can't. I am so mad at you. I can't believe that. I cannot believe that. Yeah, I think this will be one of those things you're wrong on. I really do.
I hope
But
so.
like
Hey,
you
I
were wrong on
genuinely
Ryan
hope
Ruggs.
so.
So
Yeah, you can
yeah, your batting average is looking great
you're
right now.
right there. Hey, I
All right.
admit when I'm wrong, okay?
Tell the people where they can find you, Tino.
Oh man, you can find me on BlueSky at Tino Junior 20. We are posting some of our fantasy baseball podcasts on there right now. Today we're going to record our second base fantasy dynasty second base rankings. Have been interacting quite a bit with folks on there regarding fantasy baseball, which has been a lot of fun. You can find me having these conversations with Candace, which are always fun. I miss them. I'm glad we were able to get back together and do this
Absolutely.
regarding the OC hire. But really, it's on BlueSky at Tino Junior 20, TINOJR20.
Awesome. And be sure to follow the show also on Blue Sky at Seahawks 360. And you can follow us on X or Twitter. I'm finally coming around to starting calling it X, I guess. You can follow us on that platform at Seahawks 360 Pod. So be sure to follow us, get updates. We'll have a draft series here coming up. So excited to deep dive into that with Tino. And we got some interesting things coming up to talk about for sure. So, be sure to follow us, subscribe. Like this video if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. Helps the algorithm, whatever that means. Algorithm helps us get better. So support us in that way. In the meantime, that's all the time we have for today. That's all. We're out. And as always,
All Hawks.